It is really hard to use a volume pedal when seated. It keeps sliding out from me. I'm used to doing that stuff standing up. Yeah, Dustin, as you can tell, that was a 64 non-reverb Princeton straight in. Or possibly a 78 2204. I did cheat, as most people using 78 2204s would have done. So here is the sound of the amp. Almost at max gain, like at about 3 o'clock on the gain. And here's with one kind of boost pedal. Here's a different kind. So it fattens things up a little bit. You can make it give a little bit of a level increase, and it just changes the mid-range character. Real men not only play SGs, Keith, real men keep them and don't sell them every 5 minutes. You are far from my only guitar friend who gets a new guitar, loves the new guitar, and then a matter of a month or so later, there's a new guitar. But the SG is takes getting used to. I don't have the problem so much with this being farther this way. My problem is my hand is so big that where I end up playing tends to be closer to the neck pickup than on other Gibson scale guitars. But I like it. But let me turn this nonsense off for a little bit. The reverb you're hearing is from a plate reverb, the Abbey Road plate added in post. And for those of you listening on headphones or real speakers, we're broadcasting today in glorious stereo. As you might have noticed, the guitar was over here a little bit. Anyway, the remaining things would be done on this amp besides installing the label maker software on my really cheap Windows laptop I had to buy because some apps don't run on Mac. I've got to put the labels for the 4, 8, and 16 ohms on the back. I'm going to put in shielded cables, shielded wires from the input jacks to the first tube and such like that. Just get the last of the noise out because in stock form, it is very sensitive to such things. And I might do a little cap between plate and cathode on V1B, but we'll get there. I'm going to turn on this fan because it's kind of hot in here. I'm going to try to turn it down so that it doesn't make a lot of noise. Let me know if this is distracting to you guys. I need to get it pointed at me because it is warm in the world today. And this office is the coldest room in the winter and the warmest room in the summer, or in this case, late spring. Let's see. Where were we? Where were I? I guess we'll start with questions and stuff. Actually, there's one thing I want to check because I heard guitar, but the tuner was on. I want to make sure that I haven't not messed something up. So the tuner is supposed to be muting things. Huh. It's working fine, but I was doing that intro thing, and I was hearing it through the amp, but then halfway through playing the little intro via thing, I noticed the tuner was showing the notes, and I don't have it set that way. Let's see. Questions. Oh, before I get to questions, Dustin, I was thinking about your suggestions on the last test sound check video from Tuesday, whatever it was. I think I'm going to get an SE Audio SE 4401 or 40. Is it 4100? Yeah, the 4400 is the one with all the patterns. The 4100 has just the cardioid, because I only need cardioid for my purposes. And that'd be a nice thing to have. I can use it for acoustic guitars, for these kinds of setups. I could even use it here and look even more fancy, and it'd be a nice thing to have in my arsenal. So that's the one I'm looking at. I love the SE8, but it is so mounted in such a specific way for the bench stuff. It's not easy to take on and off and move around, and they're not that expensive. I'll just have another nice mic in the repertoire. The mic that you guys heard the amp through, that was the ET65 speaker with the Royer R10. And if anyone has questions about, I made some big changes to the audio path and the plugins since the last Tuesday. Let's see, any empirical baseline for noise floor on AB763 amps, or just going by muscle memory and A-being with other specimens? Any rules of thumb? There are. Basically, if you mute the input to the phase inverter, you should hear nothing out of the amp. If you hear sound out of the amp, then you've got a problem in the phase inverter, or you've got a problem in the output tube section. And some of that a lot of that is going to be hum related, and most of that can be cured by that additional cap you see me put to the bias supply on the trim pot. Then you can mute each individual channel with where the 220K resistors go into the mix resistors go into the phase inverter. You can mute each one, and if you mute the resistor connected to the normal channel and the amp gets quieter, you've got something happening in the normal channel, vice versa for the vibrato channel, and then you can just go stage by stage through the amp, working from the phase inverter back to the preamp. And then you'll be able to say, okay, this is where most of the hiss I'm hearing is coming from. In an old AB763, it could be a noisy carbon comp. You can, lift one in, put in a carbon film temporarily, see if the noise goes away. If not, it wasn't that. You can put the original one back. A lot of times on old AB763s, the ones which don't have shielded wires, those wires get kind of microphonic with age. They get dry. I don't know why, but the cloth gets dry and the whole thing gets hard and it gets really sensitive to vibration, and there's no shielding there. Also, make sure when you're doing these tests that you have some shielding handy to put over the chassis on the bench, so you have an accurate noise floor compared to how it is in the combo, because you can end up chasing your tail trying to get out noise that's not really there. In this Marshall, I've got a sheet of aluminum underneath it. Otherwise, it would be very noisy in this environment. But in this case, or just like it would be in the cab, it's shielded on all 6 sides. And then some of the later 70s, late 60s and 70s Fenders, which did have shielded wire, have terrible shielded wire, which can become problematic over the decades. And so it's not uncommon for me to replace those. Let's see. Yeah, Keith, I know. You gave the SG a good loving home for a while. You're like someone who gets adopts rescue pets and then finds them their forever home. And I'm glad that you're taking those unloved Miras that no one else seems to want. You know I love you, man. Let's see. Other men no less real play Sheratons. I think Stepford likes a Sheraton, and some Sheratons are fantastic. Do I bias a fixed bias amp for the wattage of the tube type or the amplifier's rating? RJ Electric asks. For the tube type, if I have a 25 watt tube, I want to make sure that's between 12 and 15 watts idle dissipation. So I've got a spreadsheet. One of the variables I type in is the wattage rating, the max wattage of that tube type, and that lets me know that, hey, I'm at 58% idle dissipation. Or when you're doing cathode bias, you need to say, okay, well, what's 100%? What's 120%? And what's 90%? Because that's the range you play with. So it doesn't matter what the amplifier's rating is. You bias to the tube. Here's a good example. In the other room, I haven't brought it out for the channel yet. I've got a 1980 Vibrolux reverb. Now, 1980 was the last really good year for Fenders until the reissue series came out in the mid-90s, because they had a really bad period during the 80s and early 90s. And so the last good example of the classic Fender amp is the 1980 Vibrolux reverb. Now, it has a pair of 6L6s. 6L6s are 30-watt tubes, so you bias the amp with 30 watts in mind. The output section of that amp would be capable of putting out about 45 watts, but it has an output transformer, which only is a 28-watt output transformer. So you're not going to get 40 watts out of a Vibrolux reverb, but you are going to get a very nice, spongy, compressed sound that people really love. And the transformer gets some saturation effects. It's one of the reasons the Vibrolux reverb is very different from a Pro, is very different from a Deluxe reverb. So if I bias to that 28 watts, that would be a wimpy sounding amp. You bias for what the tube is doing and then let the output transformer take care of itself, as long as the impedances are all matched up. Does that make sense? It's 5 degrees Celsius in Dustin's world. Well, Dustin, you are aware you live in Canada. And much as I love Canada, much to people's consternations these days, I don't envy your weather. Otherwise, I'd probably be right there with you. I really need to get to Montreal and Quebec City. I'm hoping that I'm allowed and that I'm welcome and can get there and back again at some point. But I would really like to wander Montreal. Number one, we don't have any damn boulangeries or patisseries here. Memphis is a good food desert in some ways. It has some food that's just phenomenal, soul food, fried chicken, barbecue, but I can't get a croissant to save my life. And I think the closest one is New Orleans, which for some reason still has that. And I do love going to New Orleans for that. But I'd love it as an excuse to wander around Montreal and do a bakery exploration. And Keith, Colby Jack says, I loved your live stream on speakers, 5 Watt World, Keith. I only stood some of it, but I learned a thing or two. Keith, you kept asking me on that stream if I wanted to explain stuff that David Barber, for the rest of you who didn't watch it, wasn't explaining. And I felt uncomfortable being put in a position where it might look like I needed to correct David or tell David jack shit that he didn't already know. And I tried to give some augmentation, small comments in your stream, and maybe some suggested explanations for people like, if it's 100 dB at 1 watt is not 1200 dB at 12 watts, that kind of thing. But it's your show and David's show, and I was watching along with everyone else, and I don't want to interject myself into those things. So it's a balancing act, and sometimes I think I'd be better off just not commenting sometimes on some streams. I certainly don't want to piss off David. He does not need my advice or input on anything. If an equivalent film cap exists, Surge98 asks, is there ever a reason to use a tantalum cap in a new build or restoration? No. We're talking guitar amps here. Just take the world of hi-fi out of the equation, because tantalum has some advantages for some applications. If you have a severely regulated power supply, and all the tantalums are well over what that power supply after regulation is. But in guitar amps which are not regulated, tantalum's just asking for it, and you know, just use a film cap whenever you can. Joe Rinaldi says the bakeries at Publix are just as good as any given bakery in Montreal. Well, I have not tried the bakeries in Montreal, though I've heard great things. I have tried things from Publix. And Publix is a big step up from Kroger, but compared to what I've had in Lisbon, Florence, Paris, Vienna, and London, I would not rate Publix very high compared to what is possible from a true patisserie or boulangerie or just a good old bakery. So Publix might be better than a given bakery in Montreal, but I'll have to find out for myself. And I expect you either have too low an opinion of the bakeries in Montreal or too high an opinion of Publix. But that is why opinions exist, so people can be wrong in public. You know, I'm kidding, Joe. Let's see. Yeah, I've heard nothing but phenomenal things about the SE 4400, but given the space I have here, I can't use. I mean, if I need the ribbon, I've got the Royer, but when I had the Royer here in that test with the acoustic, I was picking up, I've got a flat desk here, I've got the Mac here, I've got the big screen here, I've got the monitors here. I mean, I just, all these reflective surfaces. This is okay because it's cardioid, so it's this, and it's kind of ignoring all that. So I don't need the Omni, and I don't need the Figure 8. And hypercardioid would also give me that reflection from right behind the mic. So I just need the cardioid, and this is not a very good sounding room in general. I get away with it with the Royer because there's nothing here on this side of the amp. There's a big space here, and the amp is so much louder than all this stuff. I'm not getting much early reflections into the Royer there. But in general, I thought if I had just a good cardioid. I used to have the TLM 103s, which are phenomenal, very expensive these days, and very bright, very crisp, kind of like the U87Is, which are all fantastic, but they do have a character which can be a bit much, especially since I have S issues. People are always like, you should go into voiceover, you should do that. I'm like, well, first of all, that's a very competitive field where everyone's competing these days with AI, because you can probably download James Earl Jones within the next 5 years. But also I have a problem with S's, and I've got some de-essers running, but I don't need too much emphasis in those frequencies on my voice. This is almost flat on this 57. So, what have I got dialed in? I've got a 2.7 dB boost at 63K, which seems counterintuitive because I've also got some de-essing happening at that same thing. Yeah, John, AI, that's what I meant, sorry. Then on the mids, I've got 2 dB at 2.5K. That's a real gentle thing. I've got a 2 dB dip at 600 hertz, basically 611 hertz. I've got a 1.5 dB thing going on at 220, and I've got an 18 dB high pass filter at 60. So that's all I've got going on here, which is really low for, low amount of, so yeah, 6.3K, I've got a shelf at 6.3K. Dustin, yeah. So everything above 6.3 has got a little bit of a boost. This has got a boost around a little bit of a bump at 5K. And then I've got de-esser. Where is that? The de-esser I've got mostly active at 7.7K basically. And then I've got another one at 4.1K. So I've got a little bit of de-essing at 4.1K and a much more de-essing at 7.7K. See, yeah. Do a YouTube channel, they said. It'll be fun, they said. You got to learn this stuff. But So I have a shelf right at at the same frequencies that I'm also de-essing, but it really does balance out. It doesn't sound bright to me on playback because I've tested this a lot. Sorry to go sideways to audio world. I know not everyone cares about this aspect of music. I know that Dustin and a few other guys here very much do. Is Andor the best show going right now? Thanks for the recommendation a couple weeks back, Robert. I don't know if it's the best show going because I've not seen all the shows that are going. I've not seen what's that one called? Oh, not Suspension, whatever it's called. I've not seen that one. Severance. I've not seen Severance. I have not seen The Wire. I've not seen Breaking Bad. I tried to watch Breaking Bad, though it's not going anymore. I got about three episodes in and realized I just didn't care about the characters. I've not seen all of Mad Men. I've seen a couple episodes. Wasn't that interested. And I have not. I did not like. What's the one with Brian Cox that ended not long ago? That was based on Rupert Murdoch. I don't remember that show. I didn't like that show. I don't like the characters, but maybe it's just I don't like the Culkin kids. But Andor is really good. But I don't watch a lot of TV. Secession, that's right. I hate The Boys. Do I have any thoughts on the just released Celestian Peacekeeper? Well, Too Many Guitars. I first learned of that in Keith's stream earlier this week. So that's all the knowledge I have of that. Maybe Celestian wants to send me one. Celestian, anyone at Celestian watching this want to send me one? I'll give you a review. I'll tell everyone. At that point, I'll have an opinion. Until then, I don't have an opinion. And as I'm not trying to make amps very quiet in general. I try to suit the amp to the player. So if you need a quiet amp, I don't want to put a handicap speaker in a twin reverb when what you really need is a Princeton. But I'd be glad to try it. Hey, Gary McKinney, thank you very much. What brand rectifier tube in general for GZ34 these days? Just go JJ or Sovtech. They're fine. They either work or they don't. With other tube types like a 5Y3, not all 5Y3s truly are. Some of them are GC34s in a small bottle. Don't get the Sovtech 5Y3. But for 5Y3s and 5U4 GBs, you can still get new old stock Joint Army Navy stuff from the 70s, which is like 10, 15 bucks more than current production, and they're so much better. But for GZ34s, you can pay a crazy amount for new old stock stuff. You won't hear any difference, and it may last a little bit longer than a JJ, but if something goes wrong, the rectifier tube is usually the one that bears the brunt of that. And do you want to lose $150 to a pothole that takes out your rectifier tube, or $30 when the sound's going to be the same? The voltage coming out of it's going to be the same. So most of the amps that come in here go out with the JJs when they need one. And the Deluxe Reverb typically takes a GZ34, though you can use a 5U4 GB if you want a lower voltage, 30-volt difference. Noisy garments. My clothes are noisy. Just a t-shirt. I'm not taking it off, man. Live with it. Live with the t-shirt noise. Thank you, James Felsh. It is a beautiful picture. It's a shame that there's not a beautiful subject here. If my wife were to come in and bring some coffee later, you'd really see what the picture looks like. Or maybe you're talking about the Ronnie Scott's picture in the thumbnail. I assume you're probably talking about the Ronnie Scott's picture. Hey, Joe, appreciate that very much. Colby Jack manages a voiceover company with 100+ talents, and he has not reached out to me to become the 101st. So I'm sure he's been hearing an awful lot of good voiceover people who are already tooled up for that, already have their reels and their demos and all that stuff. And I'm a bit late in the game to get into that. But Colby, if you know a guy, because I'm just talking here for free most of the time. Let's see, Taylor Nutt, 64 Tremolux. Okay, plus a 210 cab versus a Vibrolux with 210s. Tremolux is cleaner. Tremolux doesn't have. Well, Vibrolux is going to be Vibrolux reverb. The Tremolux, because it doesn't have the reverb stage, is going to have more headroom. Other than that, you know, they're almost interchangeable. The Tremolux, I think, has got a different output transformer, which also gives it more headroom. But you know, whichever one you have, make music with it, because you're not missing out anything by not having the other one. Well, you're not doing anything wrong with whichever option you have. If later you want to have the other option as well, then you'll find out what the differences are. And for some playing styles, that stuff is crucial. For some playing styles, they're going to be interchangeable if the speakers are the same and they're biased the same and they're set similarly. But Tremolux without reverb does have more headroom. Hey, Stepford, I have not had a chance to try an AC30S1. I assume that it's doing the same thing that the 10 and the 4 are doing, where they're using an LND 150 instead of a tube stage, so they can lower the cost and give the same circuit. And if it's done properly, that's fine. On the AC10, it's not done properly, in that they attenuate the hell out of it after the LND 150, so they can go to the effects loop and reverb op amp stage, which is just done at 5 volts unipolar, which is the worst thing you could put serious signal through, because it has no headroom and you hear it in that amp. It breaks up if you hit it hard. And then they bring it way back up with another LND 150. So hopefully the 30 version, the AC30S1, would not be clamping everything down to this tiny little 5 volt unipolar supply, which is less than you'd find in a tube screamer, and they would give it a good plus minus 15, so 30 volt rail to rail or 60 volt rail to rail supply, which is what they did in the old Custom Classic. They had a 60 volt rail to rail supply for all the op amp stuff, at which point you don't have to clamp it down and then re-amplify it. So it's very possible to make a very good sounding AC30 circuit using a lot of the LND 150 MOSFETs. But I have not had the 30 on the bench. I have not looked at the schematic. I don't know what they're doing. If one comes in, I'd like to know. I have seen, I'm trying to remember if it's Chris at Rift Amps or if it was my buddy Frank at Forgotten Gear Restorations. Both channels you should watch after watching mine, after my stream, not now. But they were working on one, and the build quality seemed much better than on the AC10C and the AC4C. But for the price, it should. Hopefully, it's going to last. And if you like the sound, you're halfway there already. The trick is just make sure it doesn't blow up on you. Hey, Taylor Nutt, you asked the same question 3 times in a row. I assume you didn't mean to, but everyone, please only ask a question once. Because when I see it, I'm like, did I lose my place in the stream? And then I find myself doing that, and no one wants to see me squint at the damn thing. Let's see. Every time I go to buy an SG, I find an LP I like more. It's a problem I've struggled with a long time. Well, here's the thing. I had the SG, and then I got a really nice Les Paul, really pretty. You can see it on the channel about 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago. And then I had the opportunity to get a really, really great 335. And so to fund the 335, either this or the Les Paul had to go. And they both played really well, and they both sounded really good. And I don't care about the weight so much, but here's what it came down to. SG on my lap. As I'm working at the bench. Doop-a-doop-a-doo, doop-a-doo. All right, let's test this. Turn that knob, test that. But if you have a Les Paul in that situation, it always wanted to flop over. And that's an expensive thing to start falling around on you, and, you know. So this sounded really good, and hopefully you guys agreed from the intro stuff. And it's cool, and it's for other people it's the Angus Young guitar. For me, it's the George Harrison Revolver guitar. So, though George had it up here. Yeah, if you don't have the Grovers and you have the Maestro, it's not a neck diver. Mods for an AC30cc H, so that's the head version of the Custom Classic that I'd recommend that would have noticeable positive tonal effects. Well, I've put this out on the internet. If you Google the Lyle Caldwell AC30 mods or the Sonic Audio mods, they're talking about the Custom Classic. Basically, you change. These are things I put out there 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't remember. Early days of guitar forums on things pretty much any tech could do very easily on that model because that model was new at the time. Change the 100K plate resistors on the two input channels to 220Ks. Change the, on the output tubes, change the grid stoppers to 3K, change the screen grids to 1K. And then crucially, very crucially, there's other stuff I do, but the next thing is really crucial. On the effects loop, I think it's C109 in the stock amp is a is a 220 nanofarad cap, and it should be changed to at least a 2.2 microfarad cap. I usually use a 4.7 microfarad electrolytic. You have to observe the polarities. The negative side of it goes towards the output jack of the effects loop because they made a mistake at the factory, and so you turn on the effects loop, it loses all low end. Some of them from the factory had that correct, some of them did not. But I think it's C109. It's on the main board on the bottom, right by the effects loop jacks, and it's there. Look at the schematic there. It's the one right before the output, the send, and in stock form it's a 220 nanofarad. Change that to a 2.2 or larger, 2.2 microfarad or larger electrolytic. You'll be fine. The other thing on the normal channel, they got a 330K resistor. On the volume pot in series right before the volume pot, jumper that and get some balls out of that channel so you can get some Brad Paisley things going there. Where would I ground the bias pot in a high gain amp? It depends on everything else. I would either bias it, ground it in a Marshall to the same point on the chassis where the screen node and phase inverter node, basically where the presence node is going to ground, or I'd do it separately to the chassis between that point and where the the center tap for the HT and the reservoir cap are grounded. You can also run them all in parallel but separate from each other right until you get to the input, or you can sorry, my Stream Deck's acting up, or you can do oops sorry, it did a weird timeout thing, and then I hit the wrong button by mistake. What was I going to say? If I'm designing one from the ground up, I do a very different thing than if I'm doing working on an existing amp. Basically, look at what Sir does, where pretty much everything is going to the input jack, but in a specific sequence. Let's see. Homemade is better if you want to do the work to fix it. Well, yeah, but I don't have the real estate in my kitchen or the inclination and time to go out there and make, 1,000-layer crust with all that butter. Because if I did, by the time I perfected the process, I'd weigh 400 pounds. I'd probably die happy, but Boston has some wonderful bakeries. Yeah, well, most major cities do. Memphis does not. DC, Washington, D.C.'s got some phenomenal bakeries and food from around the world. Will a 7025 tube in V1 give me a better note separation or less muddiness in DSL 40C when playing on the ultra gain channel? I don't know. it might not. All a 7025 is a 12AX7 that has passed more stringent tests. So it's going to have a consistently higher gain ratio and lower noise ratio and lower microphonics. So when you buy a 7025, you're more likely to have a good 12AX7. If you buy something labeled 12AX7, you're more likely to have a middle-of-the-road 12AX7. They're the same tube, just sorted for different specs. So you want better note separation, less muddiness in the DSL-40C when playing on the ultra gain channel. I don't think that that's the solution. I think you just need to learn how to set the amp a little bit different. And the DSL-40C is, it is what it is. It is, as I said in the amps under $1,000 video or amps under $500 video, it is a jack of all trades amp designed for the gigging musician who needs to do a lot of different styles. If you're doing top 40, if you're doing a lot of different styles of covers, you've got your clean, which can be close enough to a Fender that the audience won't know. You can do kind of a classic rock thing, which will also work for blues, and you can do kind of a metal thing, but it's not perfect at any one of them. But for the price, it does all that stuff. You might experiment with getting a Tone X or a HG Stomp or something, HX Stomp or something, and running into the effects loop of the DSL-40C if you need more sounds than the amp is giving you that you want, because the prices are coming down on those things all the time, about the $300 for the Tone X. So you'd still have the amp with the speakers and the power section, but you could have every different preamp sound out there, not just the kind of three pretty good ones that come with the DSL-40C. I'm in favor of anything that appalls JFK Jr., though I think you mean RFK Jr. Well, Mexican bakeries are fantastic, Victor, but they're not doing the same thing as what I want from a French bakery. And I do love me some Venezuela. If I were to put a master volume on a super reverb, would it be the same as adding an attenuator before the speakers? What is the difference between a master volume and an attenuator? Well, no, a master volume is in the audio path at some point before the output transformer. An attenuator is in the signal path or electronics path after the output transformer. So an attenuator is usually turning down the level that goes to your speakers. And a master volume is usually, from the output transformer, and a master volume is turning down the level that is eventually fed to the output transformer. And they are very different techniques. They have very different pluses and minuses. Master volume costs a lot less. There's no heat issues. It's simple to implement. Attenuation, to do it right, is expensive. And depending on what you play, you probably don't need a master volume on a super reverb, because you can, if the amp's too loud with the volume on 2, that's not the amp to have. You could use a master volume though. But if you want to get the sound of a crank super reverb, a master volume helps. The real answer would be to have a master volume that you don't turn below 10 o'clock, and then you have an attenuation that you add in if you need to get lower down than that, or you can use the attenuation and then the master volume just a little bit. If you're doing a little bit with each, you're not going to get into the weak area of either. Does that make sense? This has strengths and weaknesses. This has strengths and weaknesses. So here, that's still in its strength area. It's not gotten to its weaknesses. Here, it's still in its strong area. It's not gotten to its weaknesses. And a conjunction, that's like having one down here that sounds really good. Hopefully that. What a weird thing to be doing in public. So they're different things. They're used differently. In general, master volume is much easier to implement in a single amp, but an attenuation circuit can be external and can be used with multiple amps. Though with a super reverb, with that 2 ohm load, you may have some issue using the same attenuator with other amps. Thank you, Richard. I do try. I think you guys deserve it. I watch live streams that just drive me crazy with, oh my God, does this guy not realize how distorted everything is and all this stuff, or how noisy the environment is, or how out of tune the guitar is, or how orange they are. Though in my early days doing this, my color was all over the map. Have I ever heard of Scrapple? I have heard of Scrapple. I've even had Scrapple. I'm not a fan, but it is a thing. Any thoughts or experiences on quality and construction of the Fender Pro Sonic combos? Well, the construction's fine. The quality is non-existent. It's a bad design, poorly implemented, insulting to the owner. They like to catch on fire, just the same as the hot rods. And you can either have a clean sound or you can have a dirty sound. But because they're sharing the EQs and they have to have very different EQ settings to make either channel really sound good, you're limited to one good sounding channel at a time. And it's not that good sounding in comparison to the amps it's copying. It's not a Vibrolux, it's not a Deluxe, whatever. The reverb implementation is noisy and bizarre, and the effects loop is horrible. Avoid, avoid, avoid. There's no reason to bring that kind of trouble into your life. Hey, Dale Boyle Music, thank you very much. Any recommendations for a low wattage amp? I've not tried the Car Raleigh. I've not tried the Gremlin. My recommendations, in general, of the ones that I have a lot of experience with, are going to be either an old Vibrochamp, which are fantastic, or certainly the Swart Atomic Space Tone and Space Tone Juniors. Those are phenomenal. The Juniors, the 5 watt, might be 7 watts. Anyway, they have a 20 watt and a 7 watt. The Swart's fantastic. I've not tried the Car. I imagine it's great. I've had issues with current production Tone Kings, though I've not tried the Gremlin, and I have not liked the Dr. Z Carmen Gia, only because I don't like the Zobel network on the output transformer. I think it adds a honkiness to the upper mids that I hear. I don't like it. I've disabled it in that amp, and then the amp sounds fantastic, but you have to do a different form of filter on the output because E84s and reflected impedances. I mean, the good doctor is not wrong that it needs to be done. I don't like the sound of the way he did it. Other people love the Carmen Gia, and it's a well-built amp, so I'm not slamming it. It's not for me. But I would say, try the Gremlin. Certainly try the Car. Try the Swart. Try an old Vibro champ, and see what speaks to you. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well, Omelet Socks, I'm glad you found the cause, even if you don't know what it was. Or at least we don't know what it was, but I'm glad you found the issue. Oh, it ain't no thing, Taylor. I appreciate you checking in. But yeah, I figured that there's some kind of keyboard snafu or whatever. No, Chris, it's not all tube. It's got some solid state stuff in there, which is fine. If it's done right. If they did it right in the S1, that's great. They certainly didn't do it right in the 10 or the 4. From the outside, from the user's perspective, it's just a single channel AC30, but that's not what's happening under the hood. Just a second. Let's see. I knew someone was going to ask me about the Paul Davids video. We'll get there, Dustin. I've now made my 5E3 tameable in 2 distinct steps with a 68K negative feedback resistor and the bypass cap defeat. Tried to make the negative feedback on the 510. Okay. Well, you're gonna have if you have a different output transformer, you have a different secondary. You've got to change the value of the negative feedback resistor. So I don't have the 5E7 schematic pulled up, but I can tell you a 5E3 has got an 8 ohm speaker, and that 5E7 is going to have a 4 or a 2 ohm output transformer, because it's going to be expecting a 3x10 is going to be about 3 ohms, 2.5, 3 ohms, something like that. They're going to either use a 2 ohm tap or a 4 ohm tap on that output transformer, which means you're going to have a lot less negative feedback present. So in general, if you were to if you're using the same 68K on the 5E7, if you were to change that to a 33K or a 27K, then you get much proportional difference. You defeated the resistor and didn't get much of a difference. You must have done something wrong, Pastor, because if you don't have a resistor, you can have all the negative feedback and it'll sound terrible. If you remove the resistor, you won't have any negative feedback. You have to have some resistance there. But to make a 5E3 output section, and I also don't remember how they did the phase inverter on the 5E7, so I'd have to look at the stuff, and that's outside the scope of this chat. But the important thing there is the output transformer tap used. Each tap has a different amount of current coming out of it, which affects the negative feedback. It's very complicated. And, like I showed in that video on this 782204, you've got to match it for the presence, in this case, or the negative feedback in general to work effectively. On this amp, when it had the 100K tied to the 4 ohm, like it had been since 1978, the presence pot did almost nothing because there was not much current there. There wasn't much negative feedback voltage there to be mixed in. Now that it's on the 16 ohm tap, I've got full range of the presence, and I can make this amp not harsh. It's still a bright amp. Bright is different than harsh. Bright is different from, oh my God, it hurts, make it stop. Before I did that, if I had the treble at 0, and the presence at 0, it was still painfully bright. Yeah, okay, the 5E7's got a long tail pair. You can't do the 5E3 trick with an LTP or Schmidt phase inverter. You got to treat the 5E7. Sorry, you can't treat the 5E7 that way. I am terrible at strings of letters and numbers. 12AX7, 12AT7, 5E3, 5E7, all this stuff. 34, 84, flames shooting down my face. Sorry, guys. Anyway, if you have a long tail pair, you got to do the negative feedback implementation that you'd find in a Bassman or a Super Reverb, not the one you'd find in a Tweed Deluxe. Let's see, next question. Thanks, Alex. I'm sure more people like me than that. That might be what you saw at that moment. I don't know. I don't keep track of the number of likes during a stream, but I know I've got 141 people watching me right now because I got a button on the stream deck that tells me that. And that's pretty cool. Though the chat thing says it's 142, so there's a discrepancy. Which one of you is discreping? Did I ever change the bright cap on AC30s? I find this top boost channel on the TBX extremely shrill. Yeah, I don't change the bright cap in terms of the value. I change the bright cap in terms of the materials sometimes. But the stock top boost on the AC30 TBX, that's the only thing that, they got a lot wrong on the TBX, but they got a lot right. And that's one of the things that's very right, but you really got to learn how to dial in the cut and the EQ section on the TBX or any AC30. So it's very possible to sound painful. But if you want to lift the bright cap, you can. You can also change it to like a 68 picofarad or 47 picofarad if you want a little bit, but not as much as the 100 to 120 that's there. But in general, if it's too bright, you either have the channel volume way too low, or you have, which makes it even brighter, or you're not using the cut knob enough, or you have the treble turned too much up. So it's a balancing act. It's really easy to make a good Vox, sound terrible, and you can be like an eighth of an inch away from glory. You really got to spend time with it. It's not like a Fender or a Marshall where it's forgiving. I could randomly turn these knobs, the treble, middle, bass, and presence on this Marshall, just some random thing between 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock on each channel, and get a usable sound. If I do that randomly on an AC30 and I play it, I could either sound like whoa, 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 Charlie Brown, or I could just have nails on a blackboard, you know. Hey, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate that. I don't remember what your question was, but I'm glad I answered it. Money, money, money. I am not a money grubber. I'm very elegant in how I take money. Let's see. We're waiting to see, Alex. I don't know. I mentioned in a video 3 weeks ago that on the Black Star, I said, you know, in that video, it might have been longer ago, I said, if what they're saying is going to happen, the price of this may go up in 30% in the coming couple weeks. And then someone in the response to that video the other day said, well, prices haven't gone up. Go watch more MSNBC. I'm like, well, that's not how this works. First of all, a certain someone keeps backing down and waffling and changing his mind and being inconsistent. And then negotiating us into a worse position than we were at the start of this. So no one knows what's going to happen. And the shipments that were sent off then that are just arriving now, that's the ones the tariffs are going to go into if the tariffs go into effect, and whether they were even shipped to begin with or people just sitting out to wait to see what this nonsense is. So I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. We're all at the whims of a absolute lunatic freak. So we'll see what happens. And, it's not MSNBC that's telling me this. It's the fucking Economist. It's the fucking, the most conservative economic bastions of the world. The Economist and the Wall Street Journal are like, this guy's on crack. They use fancier words for it, but that's what they're saying because that's what's happening. So we'll see. We'll see if we can afford to have any of these things later. Let's see. I'm hearing intermittent ringing coming from a rebuilt basement that seems to be coming from the tubes. It's around 12K. You can't trace with scope. Well, Sun Tzu, I imagine if it's ringing, it's probably... Is it coming from the preamp tubes or the output tubes? Probably the output tubes, but it could be the preamp tubes. I don't know. If you're not getting it with a scope, it's probably not electronic. It's probably a physical vibration. You can try tube shields on the preamp tubes. I've certainly got one there. You can't see it because I'm sitting here, but on view one here, otherwise you hear the Wi-Fi going bzz, 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 bzz. Because just the pressure of the springs in a tube shield can sometimes dampen that stuff. Or if it's the preamp tubes, they won't burn you too bad. Just put your finger on it and see if you're touching each one or in any direction will make that vibration go away. Sometimes on a Bassman style, is it a rebuilt 60s style or 50s style? If it's the tweed style with the big U vertical chassis, sometimes it's tricky to get the rear panel to not vibrate against the chassis. Well, you've got the entire day to yourself and you're spinning it with us. I question your priorities, but I'm glad you're here. How to tame tremolo thump on a bias modulated tremolo 6G16 stock circuit. It's complicated. Let's see. Let me look up what circuit that is, because I don't always remember from numbers. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Oops, that's the wrong one. That's not the wrong one. Okay, just a second. Doop-a-doo. Do me a favor, tell me what the model name is, and then I can get the schematic from there. I always forget which one's which in terms of that stuff. Let's see where. Let's see. Brown Vibra. All right. All right. And just to mess with my head, they do that in the other page. All right. All right. Here we go. I'm going to call it up and then I'll share it with you guys. If I can make this bigger. All right. Just a second. Let's see. Which one am I sharing? All right. Now, let's see which one this does. All right. This is the pretty basic one. All right, so you got this bias area here. Are you guys seeing well, make sure you're seeing the mouse. All right, you're not seeing my mouse, are you? Okay, well, anyway, over at the input to the two 6L6s, you got the 220K grid leaks going to the bias. It goes over to the intensity pot. And on the right side of the intensity pot is the bias supply. On the left side, you got a 100 nanofarad cap in series, then a 100 nanofarad cap to ground. Then you got a 470K tied to the cathode of the preceding stage, which has a 470K cathode driver. That 470K resistor can be increased, which will decrease the strength of the bias. I'm sorry, decrease the strength of the vibrato present. I can't talk today. Let's do a live stream when you can't speak. Great. All right. So look at a Princeton, blackface Princeton reverb. You're going to notice that 470K is a 1 meg. And the 100 nanofarad going to ground is a 22 nanofarad to ground. Other than that, that part of the circuit is almost identical. There's some other differences, but that's what we're going to focus on. You can increase the value of that resistor from 470K to as high as you want until you dial in the strength at max intensity, the vibrato, so you can dial up the thumping that way. And then you can play around with the value of that cap to ground, which will, you can find the point where it eliminates the thump, or you can find the point where it shaves off too much low end. You got to experiment with that. In the Princeton reverb, which tends not to thump, that's a 1 meg and then a 22K to ground, then a 100 nanofarad go into the intensity pot. So that's what I'd look at. Let me close this and go to the other thing. Sorry, I'm getting pro at this, but I got a ways to go. Let's see, back to my mug, and now I got to minimize this. Okay. So hopefully that was clear. Did you guys able to see that? Because I'm not seeing any comment after Brad saying not sure yet. So I don't know if anyone's replied to what I just talked about. I assume that I've been audible. Yeah, okay. Where was I? All right, let's see. All right, scrolled up, so I gotta get back to where it was. Here we are. All right, we are at the top of the hour. We're gonna take our first of two 7-minute intermissions, and we'll see you guys back in 7 minutes. So I should be able to just push one button. And we're back. Let's see, where were we? I wanted to say something on Tuesday's test stream, the sound check 2. I said, I like having the guitar in my hands in case I get bored on a live stream. I don't get bored on the live streams. I get distracted. I'm trying to think of things to say, or what the best way to phrase something is, or I just get a little bit nervous about talking in public, as public as this is. So it's kind of a line of safety blanket thing. It's not boredom, but I wanted to clarify that. Let's see, where were we? Would I sell a 93 Fender Tweed Bassman reissue to obtain a Marshall DSL 40 CR? Sonny asks. Depends on what you're going to do. If you're going to be playing a top 40 band and you need to have low stage volume, yeah, the DSL 40 CR is worlds better. If you want to play guitar and sound really good and have fewer sounds but really good sounds, the Tweed Bassman reissue is infinitely better. Or if you're playing on really big stages, the DSL 40 CR is going to be very limited in comparison to the Bassman. So they're very different tools for different jobs, and they're not interchangeable. But I'll also tell you that 20 years from now, the Bassman is still likely to be going with some minor service, and the 40 CR is built at a much to not have a shorter life. Was that Mother Love Bone? No, it was just messing around as little walkdowns. That could be Mother Love Bone. That could be the Traveling Wilburys. That clip? No. Good. Let's see. Reset that. All right. Let's see. Where were we? Speaker recommendations to soften harsh highs in a Marshall's solid state combo that was gutted and converted to tube amp. Well, I don't know what it was converted to. But if you have and I don't know what speaker you have, Matt. So give me some more information there. Give me what the circuit is now and what speaker you have now. It may not be the speaker that's the issue, but it may well be, in which case I or others here will have some good suggestions. I have not had liver mush, Jeff Harper, because the warning is in the name. I have not looked at the Supro Ambassador new gun guy because the current production Supros are absolute garbage, and I would discourage anyone from buying one, and I would not take one in. Yeah, it's Joe McCraw, Yes, that's Shambhala and stuff, and about 35 other songs that come to mind immediately. Emmett Otter, I'm glad you liked Andor. Yeah, we'll talk about that on another stream. Dustin, yeah, I saw Paul David's video the other day, and I watched it because I knew that everyone would watch that and ask me about that amp. And here's my thought on the Decilia. It is not the game changer that Paul said. Paul is a fantastic guitarist and educator and a player and great at recording. He doesn't know as much about amps as he does about playing, and I'm the opposite. I know much more about the amps than I am a player, sadly, for me. But it is a very good amp, and it was very kind of Paul to give Decilia that spotlight. And it seemed like a very nice sounding amp. I think it's a very convoluted, expensive way to get 25 watts out of a single-ended amp. And a lot of the stuff that he talked about in terms of the regulated power supply to get rid of the noise is very necessary in a single-ended amp. It would not be necessary in a traditional push-pull amp. The single-ended, you need a much bigger transformer to handle a single-ended tube like he's using. You've got to regulate the thing and deal with all kinds of stuff to get rid of noise because you don't have any common mode cancellation. Now, I didn't like the reverb sound of that amp, but I couldn't tell because I didn't see any mic on that cab. So whether Paul had a shotgun mic attached to his camera, or there was some mic used, but it was distant and it was in a guitar store. So there's a lot of environmental reflection sounds, and so the reverb did not sound that great. And I thought it was a good amp, seemed really well built from what I could tell of the PCB. But I think at that level of build quality, I think you'd probably be better off getting someone to just get you a deluxe reverb. And if you're really fanatical about noise, put a DC, either do an elevated DC supply for the heaters or just put in a DC supply that can power the heaters for the preamp and do that little added cap to get rid of the last hum out of the bias. And you're going to have a very quiet amp for a lot less money. So, So I thought it was a good amp. Kind of a cork sniffer approach to getting there, but well done. Didn't think it was super innovative, and I didn't think it was any. The game has not been changed, but it was nice of Paul to give a small company that kind of spotlight. Alex, I cannot tell you what it would take for Fender to make a better amp because people keep buying the ones that they make. I mean, the two most popular amps of the last 30 years, the number one selling amps have been the Hot Rod Deluxe and the Blues Junior. And they're terrible and they're horrible. A horrible thing that Fender has done to the buyers, to their customers. And people eat it up. They just eat that shit up and come back for more. And so Fender's making a lot of money doing it the way they're doing it. So where's the incentive? If people stopped buying them because they keep making bad things. So when I recommend that someone go buy a Vox AC 15C or AC 30C, buy it brand new if you can. If you can afford to, buy it brand new. Get all the warranty, get all the reliability. Let Vox make their money. If you want to buy a Princeton reverb reissue or a deluxe reverb reissue, buy used. Don't directly reward Fender unless they were to change their ways, because they need to change their ways from our perspective, but from their bottom line perspective, they're making a shit ton of money, and why change? Let's see. Hey, Hans, I appreciate that. I'm so backed up right now. I don't think I could take in a super reverb reissue for a good long while. But in general, those mods are, if no tubes are needed, we're looking $240 to $320 labor plus about $60 in parts. So it's not cheap. But if you look at the price of a reissue super reverb versus a 70s super reverb in really good shape, let alone a 60s, it makes a lot of sense. And the stock amp sounds pretty good, and it can be that much better and that much more reliable for the price of a couple of pedals. Now, I don't talk about my prices very often on the videos. First of all, it's kind of crass. Second of all, if I put out a video, say I charge X an hour, and that video is from 2018, and now it's 9 years later, and someone expects my rate to still be what it was 9 years ago because of what they heard in the video. It's a whole thing. So when I do take in an amp and I talk to the owner first, we figure all that stuff out. They know what they're getting, good and bad, and I will call them and say, hey, this is what the amp absolutely needs, and these are the things I would do for mine, and these are the options that some people might really like, and I'm not trying to sell you on any of those packages or any of those other options. I'm letting you know what the options are, but at the core, this must happen for any of the other stuff to even be a possibility so that it'll continue to work for the next 30 years. Like on this Marshall, I told the guy, hey, it is now restored to how it would have been in 1978, and then we had a talk and we improved the ground scheme, and that got all that noise level dramatically lower. And that last bit of noise floor, we're going to get rid of more by putting in the shielded wiring. But the owner's known about all these steps, has okayed it, and he knows what each incremental cost difference is. Oops, wrong button. Hey, Brendan. It's probably an issue with the preamp tube in V1. But don't worry about crosstalk too much. It's not. They're coming in. They're being mixed into an op amp in that circuit, which is fine to do. But they're decoupled from each other, so they shouldn't be too much interaction. And all Vox AC 15 and 30s have weird little interactions, and don't worry about it too much. But if it could be a crosstalk in the tube itself through the B plus, so it could be V2 as well. Anyway, try some different 12x7s if it really bothers you. Yeah, that was a Clue reference, Madeline Kahn. I love Clue. I had to stop her from screaming. Let's see, get next question. I love you too, Too Many Guitars. Thanks very much. Let's see. All right. Well, Pastor, I can't comment on why your 5E7 does or does not change in the way you expect with the negative feedback changes. I'd have to have you here with your amp and we go through it together. Because once things have been changed, I'm just speculating as to what you've done and how one change might interact with another change. And Brad, you should totally do another live stream today. Thanks, Don Spencer. Appreciate that. What kind of adhesive do I recommend for Telex pieces that are lifting up on the edges? I use Type Bond 2 diluted with a tiny bit of water. And I've shown this in videos, but I will use a dry brush to get dust or debris out, and then I'll often go in there with a damp cloth or something and get any remaining dirt out, let that dry really thoroughly. And then I will put some Type Bond on a surface like a plate or whatever, and dilute it with a few drops of water, swirl it around, and I'll brush it on the part of the Telex that needs to go back down, and I'll brush it on the corresponding area of the cabinet that needs to go down, and then I'll push it in place, and I'll wipe up with a paper towel, sometimes a slightly damp paper towel, any squeeze out at that point, and then I pull it back so it's back apart, and I'll wait about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on the temperature and the humidity, because I want the glue on both pieces to start to get tacky. And then I'll push it together. I'll clean up the squeeze out at that point, and then I'll use some adhesive blue painter's tape as wide as I have, and I'll tape it down so it's held in place, and then I wait an hour, and then I carefully unpeel it, and then it usually stays right where I put it. For the cost of some blue painter's tape. You can use green painter's tape if you prefer. You can use the old beige stuff if you want, and then some Type Bond 2. I wouldn't cover an entire cabinet from scratch with Type Bond 2, but for fixing pulled up areas, pulled up areas, it works very well. Hey, Andy, thank you so much. Any technique advice to help JMI wire meltiness? Ooh, it depends on the iron you have. It can be really difficult to work on amps like that without melting the insulation if you don't have a very efficient temperature-controlled station. I use the Hacko 951. You can use various Hackos, and some of the higher-end Wellers do a great job as well, but you need to really know that it's going to be efficient. So I work pretty hot for that stuff, 700 degrees, and I work fast, because if you go slow, you'll melt the wire. And if your temperature is too low, you have to stay on the joint too long, and so the wire melts because it's tricky. If there's any exposed area between the joint and the insulation, I'll go in with some hemiostats or some other way or sometimes just a tiny alligator clip to give a heat sink there. And sometimes the insulation is just kind of melt a little bit, and you hope you have enough slack that you can strip off the little melted bit and redo it. I have found from experience that in a lot of JMIs where the old wire has gotten brittle or other people have burned the hell out of it, if I get the 20 gauge Teflon coated stranded wire, that it behaves a lot like the old stuff that JMI used. You can replace sections of it. It'll look new, but other than that, it's about the same diameter and can take the same kind of shapes that the old stuff has, but it won't melt. Also added a top boost to my JMI AC30, but increased the noise floor a lot. Shielded wire to PI input help, but still buzz. About a year and a half ago, in my vintage Vox playlist, you'll see where I added a top boost to I added top boost twice to two different 60s JMIs. Or one was a JMI, one was a kit build, I don't recall. Anyway, I showed my approach, and I'm using shielded cables to and from that circuit, and I'm telescoping the grounds on those shields. And you can also see in the various playlists where sometimes you have to move one of the wires associated with that away from all the normal channel stuff. So instead of running it beneath the pots, you need to run it about 2 inches over the center of that board that's right by the pots, and then the noise floor drops dramatically. But it's easier for you to watch those videos and see that than for me to try to describe it from memory in terms of which wire it was and where it went. Hope that helped. I appreciate it. Let's see. Can you tell how good a tube is by its current draw? Bill asks. Building a champ-like amp with parallel empty sockets for both tubes, so I can measure more easily each pin from the outside. Well, it's a bit tricky. If you're doing fixed bias, which you're not doing in a champ build, then yeah, you could. If you have a 1 ohm resistor from cathode to ground, you can measure that and say, okay, this tube's not drawing as much current as the other, but you can tell that from other biasing methods. If it's cathode biased, it's more complicated because to a large degree, cathode bias earns its nickname of self-biasing, and that if one tube is drawing more current than the next, they're going to reach a level where they both kind of are drawing the same, unless one's just radically bad. It's not. There are better ways to test whether a tube is good. If you have one that's radically bad, the cathode will show. But I don't like having 1 ohm resistors from cathode to ground on amps, or cathode to the cathode connection. You can do that with the cathode bias. You can still have the 1 ohms, but it's one more thing to go wrong, and I don't think it really is that useful. There are better ways to measure bias, but then again, I do this for a living. I'm not doing it once a year or so. You can also tell by the sound. Here's the real thing. If you have, not so much on a champ style, which is single-ended, but on the majority of amps out there, which are push-pull, if one tube is drawing less current than the other, they're going to have a lot of hum in the output because there's not going to be the common mode cancellation. Let's see. I cannot pronounce your username, MBM Carpel, but I didn't mean to make you jump. Yeah, maybe I need to do another volume pedal swell when I come back from breaks. Or maybe I'll just scare the hell out of everyone. I like the traveling dingleberries. Let's see. Well, Friedman says Dave's going to say 6 months on changing output tubes because a lot of his client base, the ones that he directly interacts with at least, hey, Wes, are professionals. So, yeah, 6 months with current production tubes, if you're actually gigging and on the road, that makes total sense. I tend to bias much more coolly than people on the internet suggest, and I know that on certain, hey, Jeff McElwain, just saw that you're here, and I'll get your question next. If I had a BE 100 in for a client, I'd probably bias it in the 40% to 55% range because the output section is not the prime source, is not the prime mover. You got so much preamp gain in like a BE 100. If I had one of his 68 things, the new Plexi thing, then I would be biasing up the section hotter because the power section is carrying more water in the Plexi style design. Hey, Jeff, sorry, I just saw you join. Look, to everyone else, it's not that Keith or Jeff are more important than the rest of you. It's professional courtesy, maybe. I don't know. Also, I like to promote their channels. So if anyone's watching my stream who by any chance doesn't know Jeff McElwain or doesn't know Keith at 5 Watt World, you should know, because if you like my stuff, you like their stuff even better, because they're better than I am at what they do. Marshall Studio JTM, it sounds great. Is exactly a JTM 45? No, but it sounds very good. Any recommendations to improve it more? Well, the real issue with the Studio JTM, Jeff, is the longevity. They've got those little green tiny pots that aren't going to last, and they're really hard to clean. And they're fragile. So you really want to make sure that underneath the knobs, all the hardware is tight. All the nuts on the front panel are tight. They rarely are in a brand new amp these days. And, make sure that it's biased appropriately, and, it's going to last how long it lasts. There's not any real mods or mods for it. I mean, the standard things that apply to any Marshall circuit. You want a little more mid-range oomph, I can put a 680 nanofarad, a larger bypass cap across the 820 or 1K on V2A. Various bright cap options and all that stuff. But in terms of really improving the core sound of the amp, the transformers is what they is. The quality of the layout is what it is. The biggest weakness and the biggest discouraging thing to me for the price point that those things go for is just the pots are really crappy. And you have to watch out on those pots. They're really prone to what's called tin whiskers. So, you can have your amp suddenly stop working, and a can of compressed air sprayed in those little green pots will make the whole thing come roaring back to life. And that's not on Marshall. That's not on Marshall. That's a current thing that's affecting all kinds of industries that are forced to use lead-free solder, which includes the plating on components. And those little green pots are really prone to that. The Supro Ambassador is made in the USA. Well, the last time, New Gun Guy, I hope they're great. And if one comes in, I'll approach it with an open mind, because I want amps to be great. But they have historically, for the last 20 years of various people buying the brand, have been awful. The worst was the Zinke era, where the boards would catch on fire because they would have 25 watt resistors mounted flush to the board that would just annihilate that section of board, burn all the traces, burn all the pads, and often burn the tube sockets, which were PCB mounted. And they use these terrible, terrible quality, cheap ceramic tube sockets that cracked all the time and were very expensive to replace. So I'd love to see if the new Made in USA Supro is good. And anyone from Supro watching this who's like, well, he says such mean things about our amps. You want to prove me wrong? Send me one. I'll tell you. I'll tell the world what it is. I'll send it back to you. I won't ask for any money. But you send me the amp, I'll do the review, then you find out what I had to say about it. I think anyone who builds an amp who's really confident in what they're doing as a musical product, as something that they're proud of, would take that challenge. I know 10 really good companies off the top of my head that could go into the warehouse, pick a box at random, ship it to me. I could show you what it is. And aside from a tube getting dinged in shipping or something, it'd be a really good amp. You know, I don't care whether that's a Friedman or a Sir or a Top Hat or a Metro or a Head First. I know their stuff is going to hold up, and they could just take a random one from their stock and send it to a guy to show you how it's built and how the sausage is made, and that's some tasty, tasty sausage. And then there are the other companies that spend all their money on glossy ads and campaigns and bribing all the YouTube reviewers to all say fantastic things about the same product on the same day, and they just read the same ad copy. Sometimes they paraphrase it so they sound like they're not just reading the ad copy, and then they never play the amp again because they made their money off of it. You know, when a new amp comes out or a new guitar comes out or a new Wonder pedal comes out and all the channels are saying it's great, tune out for that. Now, 6 months later, if the guy is still using it, that says a lot more. Oh, I didn't have a chance to I didn't pause the video on that thing. Optocoupler feedback. Yeah, that's the thing about power regulation. When you have heat and current, it's just a big can of worms to open up. We're talking about that amp on Paul Davis' channel. Now, it may be a perfect implementation. It may be fantastic forever, but simple is really solid. You know, keep it simple, stupid, is a very, very important thing, whether you're talking about a guitar amp or a mechanism to operate an airplane. You know, the fewer things that can go wrong, the fewer things will go wrong. Oh, I've seen much higher wattage single-ended stuff. The Jika stuff is absolute hot shit garbage. I mean, just hot crap. But much more than 25 watts, just totally unsafe. Unsafe at any speed. That's a really good price. That's a really good amp. And $600 for an amp with a warranty. You know, thanks for sharing that, John. All right, you're asking Brad that question. Well, Brad will know the answer. Yeah, Hans, I mean, I would love to work on your amp. I'd love to work on everyone's amp who contacts me. But if I were to open my inbox right now and just choose the first 20 amps at random, have them sent here, I wouldn't be able to walk through my room, and some of the amps wouldn't get seen for months and months, and people would be pissed off at me. It's a tricky balance. And yeah, the super reverbs and twin reverbs aren't as overpriced as the Princetons and Deluxes because of stage volume needs these days. So you can get like a 76 super reverb often for under $1,000. And let's do a worst case thing to make it 100% again. Let's say $1,500 with tubes and service. $1,500 for an amp that will seriously rival anything you can get from Two Rock or Dumble for cleans. Now, you might argue with that, but I guarantee goddamn to you that I've got in the other room I did have until a couple of days ago, a 65 Super Reverb with reconed speakers, and it sounded fantastic. I didn't put it on the channel because I've been so crazy dealing with the stuff with my mom. And if Robin Ford or Jeff McErlane here came over, I wish I could just snap my fingers and get Jeff here, and had him do the demo, you think, oh my God, where can I buy that? And, you know, same if Robin Ford were playing it. Once an amp gets to a certain level, you get diminishing returns above that. And a really well-operating super reverb is like well above the baseline for good sound. You know, to buy for $1,500, get a fully restored 76 super reverb voiced right with a couple of the CBS mistakes removed from it. you'd be looking at $4,000 for equivalent 2-rock, and that's maybe for a head. I'm not sure what the cabs cost. You get it, you get into it, and there's nothing against 2-rock. 2-rock makes great stuff. Now, I need to figure out why this thing keeps timing out. Let's see, I need to make that stop doing that. Let's see. Second, I gotta. I got an interface thing here. I told it to do a screensaver when it went to sleep, which to me meant that if nothing was being done that used that it would display an image I displayed. But it started to do it in the middle of the stream. So anyway, sorry. Ironing out the wrinkles. I almost did Running with the Devil, the intro to this thing with the SG, because the sound was there. But there's some playing stuff on that. Not the ability to move your fingers, but the ability to having practice playing that bit. And I just haven't done that. And so it just sounded very like a generic Van Halen thing. And I was thinking, man, if I could just snap my fingers, get Leon Todd here or Uncle Ben, the guys who live in that world, the Phil X's of the world. It's right-hand subtlety. It's the same reason I'm holding an acoustic guitar, but I would never sound like Brian Sutton because he spent 100,000 hours doing different things than I've done, and the same thing for the Van Halen stuff. Just little bitty things that add up. But, all I can do is make the amp do the thing, and the amp does the thing, even if I don't do the thing. That's why I did the Rush bit, because I have spent quite a few hours doing that thing when I'm supposed to be doing homework. Yeah, let's see. Okay, well, Brad didn't answer Sonny's full question. Couldn't answer Sonny's full question. The Bassman reissue is a really good amp. It's an odd one in some ways compared to Fender's other reissues. I've got a video on one, a couple months back, maybe up to a year ago back now. The time has flown, where I show how I make it into sound like an actual one, because I was comparing it to a actual 58 that was here at the same time. I would say that the DSL 40C is a good amp, as Brad says, but the Bassman, when the filter caps are taken care of and a few minor mistakes are taken care of, is a better amp if it meets your musical needs. I have not worked on the Carvin Legacy amps. Check yourself, fools. Sorry. Not a lot of Carvins coming through. I think a lot of Carvins haven't lasted long enough to get long-term service in. Pastor used yellow painter's tape just to be adversarial. Respect, man. Contact cement is good, but it's harder. The cleanup's not as easy as with the tight bond. Hey, TC, built a 5F1 kit, wanted to attend a Mojo Tone 5v3 build class. Courses or tech schools that would help with understanding electronics. Well, every college in the world has got electronics courses. But a lot of, depends on how deep you want to go into that. Go to valvewizard.co.uk. I need to put a graphic like the question marks before I have any question, please thing, just to pop that up on the screen every time someone asks this question. Go to valvewizard.co.uk. and look at what Merlin's got up there and read his entire sample chapter. And if that starts to click in your head, great. Buy his book, go farther down that course. Or maybe as you get in there and see how you do all the calculations and, like load lines, and you're like, man, I just can't follow any of this. It may not be for you. Maybe just take the Mojo Tone course and learn how to connect the dots really well and have a general overview of what's happening without understanding everything on a mathematical level, because it's not for everyone. But it might be for you. But go for the valvewizard.co.uk, and you'll probably get enough information to help you start you down one path or the other. See, that's awesome. All right, once my stream is done, everyone go to Brad's, and he'll go through a DSL 40C, and Sonny can see how it's built, and everyone else can see how it's built. I think they're pretty good amps. I've had one in that had a catastrophic failure, and that's because it had a minor failure with an output valve, as Brad would say, and the previous tech butchered it. And because of the butchery of the previous tech, the output section had a massive failure, but because it used chassis-mounted EL34s, I was able to replace those sockets and rebuild all that, and then it was great. Nothing else in the amp failed. Just output tubes go bad. Sometimes they take out screen grid resistors, which is what they're designed to do. And if the previous tech hacks everything up, then it snowballs. Hey, how many of the simulclass 295s do I see that need work? That's only like the third one I've ever had. I'm not well, the best way to put this. Of the people using power amps, I think a relative few number of them are still using the simulclass 295s, because it's such an expensive proposition, and a lot of the people who were using that back in the 90s were using big racks and have moved on from racks. And the other market for big power amps is our bass players, who tend to go solid state. And while my minuscule love of Mesa is well known, the simulclass 295 was pretty good in some ways. You notice I'm trying to remember which one it is. Yeah, the simulclass was pretty solid. I replaced the 400 volt caps with 630 volt caps. That was the crux of it, and had one failed filter cap, and the standard stuff where the carbon comps are stupid, change those out, and it had a broken standby switch. Those were all pretty easy, very solid stuff. It's kind of like the early dual rectifiers where the output sockets were mounted to the chassis rather than PCB. As Mesa went on, the designs got worse, and everything became more and more badly done PCB stuff, to the point where you'd have Mesas where the traces were so close to each other on the board that they'd arc. When Mesa used more wires than traces, they were better, but they still have weird things with carbon composites where metal oxides, et cetera, should be used. But yeah, it was a nice sounding amp, and very, very heavy and very, very expensive. I would say that the simulclass 295, up through the Mark II with some modifications, and the very early dual rectifiers are the ones that I would suggest to most people as the, quote, acceptable Mesas that can be made to sound very good. But there's so many weird little decisions, like the tantalum caps on everything, and the 400 volt caps on everything. And in the amps that have the 12 volt regulated supply, it just always just burns, and the diodes often burn on the board, even on the early dual rectifiers. It's like they spent more money on the marketing than they did on the actual design and testing, because it's really easy to slap engineering on a logo. It's really hard to actually do engineering. Or at least Mesa thinks it's very hard. Let's see. Black Star is now at Korg. That's sad, John. What brand caps do I prefer for replacing doghouse caps in a vintage Pro Reverb? I use MOD and I use F&T. And I've been having very good luck with MODs, and they're rated for higher temperature than F&Ts, and they cost the client less, but they seem to have very similar performance and longevity so far. But if you're at all cautious about using the relatively new brand MOD, use the F&T. Or if you're in Europe or other parts of the world, you might want to go with the tube amp Dr. caps, which are also very good, but in the United States, they cost more than the F&T, which is weird because F&T is also German, but that costs a lot more than the MODs. And the ones I would avoid using at all costs would be the Illinois capacitors and the Sprague Atoms. Sprague Atoms are no longer Sprague Atoms. They're absolute crappy small caps put into a big blue casing and sold for $30 each. It's just a scam. Is current draw related to its health? Yes, all other factors being the same. But it doesn't mean that an amp with a lower current draw is bad. It just means that this tube, it's not an amp, a tube. If tubes have a operating range within which they're, when you make tubes, some of them are going to draw 19 milliamps, some of them are going to draw 30 milliamps. That's the normal range. So you get one that draws 12 milliamps. The seller says that was below our design spec. The one that draws 50 milliamps, that's above our design specs. So it's not like they're putting out, hey, we make an EL34 and every one of them draws 30 milliamps, whatever. There's a range. So you can have one that's at the low end of the range and the high end of the range. Both are healthy tubes. The issue with most amp designs is you want to have two tubes or two pairs of tubes or two sets of tubes per side, which draws the same number of milliamps per side. So if you have an amp with push-pull and one's at 19 milliamps and one's 30 milliamps in terms of the way that tube is sorted, that's not matched. But if you have one that's 19 milliamps and one that's 20 milliamps, that's close enough to be a matched pair, or both are 19 milliamps on a tube tester, where all the other factors are the same. You're just seeing what the current draw of the tube is under the same fixed conditions. And then you have these two tubes which are within the manufacturer's spec and they're matched to each other. And then you adjust the bias until they're drawing the current necessary in that circuit. And again, I'm back to doing weird hand gestures on screen. Yeah. I suppose most of the deaf population are not watching this channel, so they're not wondering what the hell I'm doing. Let's see, where was I? Oh, I love Wilco and Tommy Stinson. Yeah, my buddy Steve Selvage played with Tommy in Tommy's Bash and Pop band. What was that? 5-10 years ago now? Jesus Christ. Yeah, I love Wilco. Back when I played out, I would do Jesus in America a lot, And Nils Klein is such a phenomenal talent. I'm really jealous you got to see Wilco live. Pizza and beer time. I'm jealous of that too, Wes. Hey, Lee in the Springs, how often can old tube sockets cause a short? I'm going to replace mine to see if I can find why my amp keeps blowing a fuse. Well, they don't do it very often, but they will do it. I have a buddy, same buddy, Steve Selvage from Bash and Pop I was just mentioning. Also plays in the Hold Steady. He's still in the Hold Steady. I think Bash and Pop has passed. I don't know what Tommy's doing. But anyway, I digress. He has a 73 Deluxe, and it kept blowing screen grid resistors on the same tube socket. So, and at first I thought, okay, well, the first one came in, I had a blown screen grid resistor, changed the resistor, changed the tubes. Actually, no, it blew the screen grid resistor. I changed the screen grid resistor, put in the tubes, everything seemed fine. It came back about a month and a half later, had blown the same screen grid resistor, and I knew it was one of my high-quality 3 watts that rarely blow. But it blew, so I thought, okay, well, it must be a bad tube. Even though it worked fine, it must be after 2-3 hours of stage volume failing. So I got him a new pair of tubes and changed the resistor, sent it back. It came back about 2 months later, same bad screen grid resistor. So at that point, I got him a new pair of octal sockets and a new pair of tubes and a new pair of screen grid resistors, and it's not been a problem since then. But the weird thing, the thing that really made me think, I was kind of rolling the dice on this, is that I did not measure any resistance between the screen and the adjoining connections on the tube. There was nothing I could measure in terms of a resistive path on the tube socket that told me there was a problem. I just knew that, hey, it keeps blowing the screen grid resistor on the same socket, no matter what tube, no matter what resistor, no matter the wiring, and the voltages are all in spec. And I even disconnected the negative feedback wire and made sure it stayed on the socket. It was the socket, but it was only experience, and that was pretty much all that was left. Occam's razor. But usually, if you have a problem with an old tube socket that's causing a short, you'll be able to measure some kind of resistance where there should not be any. Like if I measure like 800K between two pins, and normally that should measure infinite. But sometimes just cleaning them does the trick. It also seems to be a change in the quality of Fender tube sockets used between up to 68 and after 68. Oh yeah, don't buy the new Gibson reissue amps. They're Mesa made garbage. I am not the greatest. That was Muhammad Ali, Sonny. Mama called him Cassius Clay. I'll call him Cassius Clay. Which would I choose to work on in a pinch? The Marshall GSL 40CR or a Fender Tweed Bassman reissue? The equivalent to work on. Which would I prefer to own or play? The Bassman, which I recommend to more players in modern contexts. The DSL 40CR. I think the Bassman's better built, but they're both same degree of difficulty to work on. I think that guy's coming. I'm not criticizing the guy Wes. This is again the Celia amps on Paul Davis' channel. Now, I really do like Paul's channel a lot. I get a lot of enjoyment and good information from it. This is not a criticism of Paul. Well, that guy came from working at Laudon Microphones and coming from a hi-fi background. And so from a hi-fi background, a lot of what he's doing makes sense because you're trying to achieve a result which is kind of antithetical to how most successful guitar amps have worked. Now, I'm not saying that his is not going to be successful, but it is a very expensive way to get from point A to point Z. I don't know the Blackstar HT5R veteran vibes. If judging by the model name, I assume that's one of their little 5-watt things. And given what my bench fee is versus the cost of all those little 5-watt Blackstar and other import amps, it probably would not make sense for people to have me fix them. So I've not ever had one. Thoughts on Filtertron style pickups? I like Filtertrons and an old Gretsch or something. I don't have any. Pardon me. But someday maybe I'll get a Gretsch kind of thing and get some TV Jones in there. Would I rather service 93 Fender Bassman reissues or one Mesa Boogie? It depends on the Mesa Boogie amp. I'd rather do one Mesa than 93 Fender reissues if I can actually fix the Mesa and send it out sounding really good. The trouble with some Mesas is seemingly impossible because there's so many that, hey, the clean channel is noisier than the dirty channel, and there's a hum that's always present, and it's due to the layout of the traces on the board, and there's no way to fix that. But I've got to eliminate 78 other things to be sure that that really is the case. And it's, so if it's a Mesa that's fixable, I'd rather fix one Mesa. There's some models I'd rather just continually toil away at Bassman reissues because I know each one of those can go out and sound great than one Mesa that would never sound any good. Yes, I saw you, Dave Edwards. By the way, speaking of channels, you guys need to check out Dave Edwards' designs, too. He's got a really nice channel doing stuff along these lines. If you like me, you'll like him. Yeah, they talked about the regular power supply, and then Paul Davis is like, no, Lyle's wrong. I'm like, I said It doesn't have any real advantages for the sounds we mostly like to get, and it's very expensive. And I stand by all that. And if I wanted to make a standard design amp quieter, there are ways to do it without regulating the entire power supply. DC heaters, at least for the first 2 or 3 tube stages, will usually do the trick, and then just get rid of the last hum in the output section. That can be done for about $100, not $1,200. The speaker wire gauge in a Princeton combo 18 versus 12 make a noticeable difference in sound or valume. Thank you for sharing. Well, Cameron, thank you for being here and thank you for asking. You will not notice any difference between 18 gauge and 12 gauge with a Princeton. There's just no current, and the distance is so short. You would not notice any difference between 18 and 16. You would not notice any difference between 20 and 12 for that short a distance with that low current in a Princeton. You would notice that if you use 12 gauge wire, that'd be very difficult to fit into the lugs on the speaker. It'd be very difficult to fit into a standard 1/4 inch jack, plug rather. So it'd be very physically difficult to work with and be very stiff and put a lot of weight on the speaker connections. Whereas if you built the same quality thing using quality 18 gauge wire, you would have a much lighter weight connection with less tension on the speaker terminals, be much more flexible, much easier to work with, and sound exactly as good and be exactly as reliable. 12 gauge is almost never necessary for speaker cables for guitar. There's an argument for some very, very high wattage bass amps that could possibly be an appreciable difference. If you're doing if you're running a mastering lab, sure, use the 12 gauge just to be perfect, but they're going to be using 12 gauge Romex for their speaker cables. That stuff's never going to get moved or disconnected. If you're doing, in Dustin's world with huge PA fly rigs, you use massive connections for that stuff, but we have much more wattage, much more current, much greater distances. Anyway, I think we are exactly at the top of the next hour. So we're going to take another 7-minute intermission, and then we will come back. So see you then. All right. Hope I didn't scare anyone that time. Oops, wrong button. That's from last week. Try to get through as many questions as possible because at the end I want to share my initial thoughts on the blue chip pick that finally arrived and that I've been playing. And I want to answer some questions that I had before ordering it that I have not found reliably out there because there were so many reviews about this is the best thing ever, and you never know. You never know. More on that later, but I'll share information that I wish I had known before I ordered it, and it'll make sense when I get there. But for those few of you who care about acoustic things, though, it's really nice on electric as well. Though I got the large one, so it's a bit big for a lot of my electric needs. Let me hide this and not nag you guys. Let me take off those things. All right, let's get to your questions. That's why you're really here, not to hear my thoughts on picks and such. Ever opened up a divided by 13 thoughts? If so, yeah, I have. Really good circuits, really poorly implemented. They have the output tubes way too close to each other. They get really hot. They have the plates facing each other very commonly. They use a lot of cloth-covered wire for places where it doesn't hold up very well. That have some janky bias pot implementations where they're not mechanically secure. They all seem like, all the ones I've been inside have seemed like prototypes rather than builds, rather than commercial products. They sound good when they work. When they fail, they fall down hard. And I don't understand why you would have two tubes spaced that close together when they should be spaced this far apart. But when you really cram them together, heat builds up. There are right and wrong ways to position tubes in relation to each other, including distance. And people who love their divided by 13s, that's fantastic. The amp has been skating by, and I hope it always skates by. But when it fails, I can almost predict the ways in which it will fail. Will I ever be offering a custom amp in the vein of an early Fender or Vox, Stephen? Well, I've got a deluxe reverb style amp that I'm finishing that someone ordered and then changed their mind, and I'm going to make that available for sale. And if I can ever get the Excalibur project back on track, and with everything on the market going up in the air right now, I don't know. That's derived from a 62 AC15, which is not an amp that Vox has made since 1968. In the true AC15 form. So yes, but I'm wondering if my Excalibur experiment has just, I don't know whether I can do production amps and do everything else I need to do. But custom amps, I might revisit down the road. It's just there's so many amps being built out there. And if I play the Me Too game, am I doing it to be Me Too? Am I doing it because I'm really offering something great? I know I can build a great amp, but it's just, I don't know. I have X amount of time, and it takes X amount of money to start that stuff up, and I'm usually lacking X amount of money or X amount of time. It's a push me, pull you kind of thing. Thanks, Richard. That's one of the reasons I do this. I don't want people buying crappy amps. I want people buying good amps, and especially since the entire industry is designed to make you buy crappy amps because they cost companies less to make, and they make more profit on them. That's the thing. Blues Juniors sound really, really good for the money. Back, especially, they used to be very expensive. Now they're like $1,000. They sound really good until they don't, and when they don't, it's because they've burned themselves the fuck up, and the repair can be very expensive. Though the stock speakers are not very good, or rather, they're not as they are. I'm not saying they're not that good. I'm saying that the amp sounds better than what comes through the stock speakers. If you put a different speaker in there, the amp sounds even better. The trouble is the amp is still running way too hot. built way too poorly with stuff that's just built to self-destruct, and then they self-destruct. And instead of someone saying, hey, I had a Blues Junior and it blew up on me, I'll never buy that again. They go and buy the new Blues Junior because, hey, I had the Blues Junior 1 and now they got the Blues Junior 3, or now they got the Blues Junior 4, and it's Lucy in the football, I promise I'll hold that football for you, Charlie Brown, and people take a swing. Yeah, the old Blue Eminent speakers in the basement reissue do sound really good, Andy. The trouble is, that's the 30-year-old speaker now. Sometimes those need to be reconned, but they're the best sounding speaker in a 10-inch for a super reverb or basement since the old CTS. But the best speaker for that is still the old CTS Alnico that's been reconed properly by a good reconer. Issues with Blackstar HT5, again, Veteran Vibes. I answered that earlier. To everyone who's new to the chat, please ask your question once. I will get to it, I promise. I try to answer every question in the order that they're asked. And if you ask a question and I haven't answered it yet, it means I haven't gotten to it yet, because I'm not here. The most recent thing I see on what I'm seeing is Greg Davis saying that they sound amazing, though, but I can also see that Pastor just said Strat into a TSO 808 pedal. That's the most recent comment. I'm not there yet. I'm back earlier in the chat where you had asked the second time about Blackstar HT5s. I'm not criticizing you, and I'm glad you're here and welcome. But if you guys could kind of, if you're not talking to each other, if you scroll back to where I'm responding, it'll make more sense to you. Jeff, though I'm going to jump ahead. Jeff McElwain says the new 2-rock built divided by 13 amps have made significant changes internally to address a lot of the design issues I was talking about. Well, good. I did not know that 2-rock is making divided by 13, but 2-rock has made a lot of amps, and I know I've spoken with Jeff about the guy behind 2-rock, and it'd be an interesting person to know. Jeff does know him and thinks highly of him, and I have no reason to doubt Jeff's motivation there. So yeah, like I said, the circuits were always really good and sounded good, but they were skated on the edge of acceptable. So I would love to see one of the new ones that had that all addressed. And if Jeff is saying that, I believe it. Let's see. There are amp builders making amps that claim their circuits and transformers designed for high current, low voltage on the tubes, claiming that modern crappy tubes like that environment will last. I think you might be referring to the Blackstar's got one thing like that, and the 65 amps, which seems to be making a comeback. I just saw a new thing from Dan Boole on that. Had an amp where they designed transformers to do the same thing. I wouldn't say that modern tubes are all crappy, but they're not as good. I would tend to side with Dan Boole. I know that he had Serge at Mercury in conjunction with the late and very much missed Patrick at Mercury, makes specific transformers to achieve that low voltage, high current circuit. But then 65 amps went away, seemingly. Maybe they'll come back. I trust Blackstar less than I can throw them, because I could probably chunk a Blackstar pretty far, as lightweight as most of them are built, especially that one new one. I think Blackstar had some good stuff, and they've had some awful stuff, but they have marketed them all brilliantly. I'm not a big fan. Let's see. The Cybertruck of electrolytic caps. Ugh. Trying to get the next question. I think I'm at one of my No, I'm not at the break. Yeah, Wilco is fantastic. On that subject, while I find the next question, I was asked Tuesday if I'm into any prog, if I listen to prog, and my first answer was not really, other than Rush. And then I thought about it more. I'm like, well, is Tool prog? If so, I like that. It is, and I would say that Tool has aspects of prog. And I would say that Radiohead is prog, and I love Radiohead. I think Radiohead is more prog than most prog. I've done my time with King Crimson around the Discipline era, though I don't really enjoy it so much as it was an intellectual exercise, which is one of the problems I have with a lot of prog. I liked The Move, which is kind of like proto-prog with the Fire Brigade that turned into ELO, which was also kind of prog in its own way. What is that? The transition to the diminished. Anyway, I wasn't planning on doing a concert. And I would say that Wilco is in the prog camp when they choose to be, like Impossible Germany. That's some cool shit. And even some television. So, if a lowercase prog I like. Too many capes, not so much. Sorry, no offense to Rick Wakeman. I can never criticize Rick Wakeman for the excesses of Yes, because he gave us Life on Mars, and for that, I can purchase a 65 deluxe reverb for $500. Someone has screwed up while removing the bright cap. Now the volume and treble cap are interactive. Is it worth buying to convert to an eyelet board? Unless they really butchered more than that, that's all very easily fixable. Not really converting to an eyelet board. Just look at in my Fender Reissues playlist, things you can do to make that amp much more reliable. It's just moving the stuff that gets hot off the main board to the output tube sockets. It's a good sounding amp, and I do cut a trace from the vibrato channel volume pot going back to V2B, and I replace that with a shielded wire. Just because of a mistake they made in the board eyelet, not eyelet, the board layout. But it's not worth gutting and rebuilding. I have done that. It's expensive, and it is a incremental improvement in terms of sound. If you want to do it, go for it, sure, but it's very expensive. Let's see. Might get a kick out of the new Timex Q80. I'll check that out after this, Chris. I'm rocking the G-Shock 5610U today. Let's see. Now I'm to where I was during a break. Hey, Martin. Am I a Fender or Gibson man guitar-wise? I have both. And what is my preferred scale length? He sold all his Gibsons years ago and stayed with Fender. I like both. I want to be proficient with both. I find myself more at home with Fenders because I've played Fenders longer. And above the 12th fret, I make mistakes on Gibsons that I don't make on Fenders. And my right hand is much more comfortable on Fenders than on Gibsons. Some of that is the scale length, and some of that is not so much on the SG, but on a 335, the 335 or the Les Paul, just because the tailpiece is higher. My hand sits at a different place than on a Fender. But then again, on the Fenders, Merrick Johnson and the K-line, which have very similar bridges, that's home base. Same if I go to my Tele. If I go to the HSS Strat, which has the Godot 510, I've got to keep my hand in a slightly different position for that bridge. So it's all these little things. If I play a guitar for 15 minutes, I can play it then. But switching back and forth, I'm more instantly at home with Fenders. So for those very few people out there trying to say, how do I play more like Lyle? First of all, play as little as you possibly can because you've got so many other demands on your time. Second of all, start to have weird hand stiffness and joint pain, and then chop off part of your ring finger in a wood planer, and eventually you'll atrophy to the point where you can play like me. Hey, Michelle M., thanks for being here. The oldest amp I've worked on is 1936 or 39. I can't recall. I think it was a 39. 39 Gibson EH-150, which was the companion amp to the Charlie Christian EH-150S guitar. And that was about a year ago, a little bit less maybe. That's the oldest. After that, it was like a 46 Gibson BR4. And then I think the oldest Fender I've ever had was a 49 or 50. And then I've had quite a few, well, not quite a few, there aren't quite a few in the world. I think a 52 was the earliest 50s Fender I've worked on, and I've worked on some Gibsons from like 56. But yeah, 39, I believe, is the record. I hadn't had an Oahu thing that might have been from about the same time period, but I couldn't date it. It was covered in the same wrapping that you would find on a bowling ball. Let's see. Hey, James Felsh, what is making the good low noise tube 80 dB in difference to more noisy tube physical? It's a physical difference in the material. How tubes are made, that's a much bigger subject than I can get into right now, especially since I don't have graphs or photos. But there are people out there who have websites devoted to tube construction. And it can be micrometers between two wires inside a tube, which make all the difference. And the tension on components, the tension, the thickness, the rigidity, the materials chosen, how the plating is done, how everything's suspended. It's very complicated. But in general, tubes are made to be within a certain range. The ones that came out perfectly, they're going to sell as a selected 70-25. The ones which came out okay are going to be maybe a 70-25. And the ones which are not so great are acceptable, more than acceptable, are going to be marketed as a 12AX7. And the ones which are terrible, they're going to sell in bulk to the big box stores like Guitar Center and stuff. So if someone buys tubes from Guitar Center, that's what they're given. Go to a tube store. Go to the tube store. Go to Eurotubes. Go to Tube Depot. Someone who makes a living doing this, who's got testers and aren't afraid to use it, who are going to get a big batch in, test them all, and then have a pile of rejects that they're going to send back to the distributor. So the stuff that they sell is going to reflect well on them. And the stuff that gets sent back to the distributor often gets resold to the big box stores and then sold again to people like us. So, oh my God, $4 extra to have the tube sorted and tested? Yeah, $4. I want my $4. I answer much more than 93 questions. I may not be as punished with them as Dave is, but I do get my share of punishment. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Oh, don't worry about anything on the Class 5. Enjoy the Class 5 as long as it lasts. There's a lot of crosstalk built into the board on those, and to fix all that costs way more than the amp is worth. The only two things to do on a Class 5, if you have one and you really like it, they've got a 10 watt or 5 watt resistor. I think it's R6. For whatever reason, that number came to mind, in place of a choke on that amp. And it's one of those cement resistors with a little metal legs with the prongs on them, and they are attached to the main PCB with lead-free solder, and it's a lot of stress and a very small amount of wave soldered lead-free solder, and those often break or just due to vibration and heat. So the trick there is to get all the old lead-free solder off, put the resistor back in place, actually turn the prong so that the thing is mechanically mounted to the board, and then reflow with standard solder or higher quality lead-free solder if you prefer, so that the R6 is not cutting out. And there are other changes you could make. I wouldn't recommend spending the money on them these days. But many versions of the Class 5 had the output transformer mounted in the wrong orientation, such that there is always hum. And if you always have hum, as soon as it's powered on, before any signal flows, the fix is to rotate the output transformer 90 degrees, which again, now that those things are 15, 20 years old, can exceed the value of the app. But it shows how much thought they gave to us, the buying public, when they put that out on the market without testing these things. You'll be much, much happier with the AC-15. I hope you really love that app. When you get the AC-15, when you get any of the current production Voxes, remember that the production tubes, the tubes they put in there, have been shipped several thousand miles and may or may not be great at this point, because that's a lot of vibration and transport for those to go through. So it's not uncommon to get a new Vox and say, well, it sounds all right, and then put in a new set of just JJs, nothing crazy, just JJ, 3 JJ ECC 83s and 2 JJ EL 84s. It's going to cost you about $120. Put those in there and like, holy crap, that amp sounds better. So if you're not thrilled with the AC-15 at first, remember the tubes may not be that great. And on the top boost channel, if it's your first Vox, the tone stack works very, very differently. So play around with that. Yeah, I understand that, I'm looking at Jay Frisbee's 3 comments. I understand that Dan was doing some really good marketing, but for the most part, he backed that up. He and Peter Straub were backing all that stuff up with really good designs, real good amps. Some of the models I was not as big a fan of, like some of the Londons. They were copying some mistakes in the 1974 Marshall that they were basically copying aspects of it from, and like in the how the tremolo turned on and off. And the boost feature on their EF86 channel was done by connecting or disconnecting a cathode bypass cap, which does give you a boost when it's connected. The trouble is when it's disconnected, there is no hum rejection in that cathode, and so the EF86 without that cathode bypass cap had hum. So the fix on that I did on the London was to always have the cathode bypass cap engaged so that there was no hum on that channel. But then I did a voltage divider that was switched to give the same effect of the boost. So it was usable the same way as intended. You still got the same dB boost, but you did not have a quieter sound with hum versus a louder sound without hum. You had a quieter sound and a louder sound, and neither hummed. So if Dan watches this, I'd be glad to talk to you about some things I noticed in the previous models that could be made even more better. And I hope that they do get the money together, because it's really tough to do this. And I don't know what happened. I don't need to know. It's none of my business. But I think they actually are doing this because they're crazy and they love audio and they want to make good things. And they have such a great look. ELO and Sticks in Kansas, I would say, are all Prague adjacent. Very innovative. Maybe later Sticks, less so. Kansas, I know about 4 songs. I'm not that familiar with them, but those 4 songs are, in there. What was it? I think I did the wrong key. There it is. Brand X, UK, King Crimson. Yeah, I respected the hell out of all those bands, but they didn't speak to me on a visceral level. But I love the skills that the various members developed as applied to other things. Like if you listen to Tony Levin with Peter Gabriel, all that deep skill that he had from King Crimson, that comes through in a more emotional space for me. And you listen to, oh my God, like Phil Collins' drumming on Woman in Chains by Tears for Fears breaks me. That drum part is so good. And it's all the training he had from Genesis and Brand X. But he wasn't singing, wasn't writing on the Tears for Fears. He was just playing. It's so what his choices are so innovative. The way Manu Katché does, where you're like, they're playing 10% of what they can play, but because they can play so many different things, their options at any given moment are so beyond what most people can even conceive, and it's just beautiful when it all comes together. Where's the... There's the octave. Sorry, it's bothering me. Brad should be doing another stream after this. If not, I'll call him, make his little bald ass do it. I appreciate you, Hans. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Well, I love Tone Talk. I love Dave. I love Mark, and I'm glad that they do what they do. And Dave certainly has experience I don't have. And there are places where we overlap, and there are places where I'm weirdly off on my own. But I will say, having been on there and having made a film reference on that show, they didn't get it. I wanted to go to Tossie Station and pick up some power converters. So some of us are more in the pop culture, and some of us have been holed up in a studio for too long. Some guys have been both. Hey, Alex241. Until recently, he was not aware that there was a difference between instrument and speaker cables. What are the differences? Well, number one, an instrument cable must be shielded, in which case you have a center conductor, which is the positive, surrounded by the shield, which is ground, which is critical. Otherwise, you're going to have a very noisy signal. So you need to have a shielded cable for instrument. For speaker cable, the shielding is not necessary at all. As long as you have a positive and a negative, you're fine. Second of all, there are significant currents present with speakers that are not present with instruments, because the instrument is putting out maybe a volt if you hit it really hard, and infinitesimal current, whereas you're putting out many volts, many watts, a lot of current out of a typical amplifier. As the wattage of the amp goes up, the amount of current and heat that's potential there increases, and so you need to have a larger diameter wire for that to supply that current. So in a guitar cable, I may have 26 gauge wire. I may have 22 gauge wire. I may have 20 gauge wire, but typically 22 to 26 is typical on a guitar cable. In a speaker wire, if I use 26 gauge, unless I was doing like a 4-watt champ that never was turned up, odds are it wouldn't be efficient. And when you have an inefficient transfer of energy, some of it turns into heat, or it just would, it'd be sounding weak until all of a sudden it would burn out. Then you wouldn't have a load. So there are charts available. You can find, hey, for this current, I need X diameter of wire. It gets more complicated than that, because it's X current at Y distance equals Z diameter of wire. But in general, you just want to be safe. So you don't want to use lower than 20 for most combo amps, and you don't want to use more than 14 for most applications, because 12 won't fit in the connections that you're using typically. You can buy special connectors, but you're not going to need 12 gauge wire in any guitar rig. You're not going to need 14 gauge speaker wire in a guitar amp setup. If I were doing a combo, I would use 18 gauge for almost every combo, except for some stuff where I could get away with 20. And for external speaker connections, I'd use 16, sometimes 14 if it was a really long run. But you're talking about from a head to a 4x12. Let's do it. Most of them are going to be 6 feet or less. Some of them maybe 10, 15 feet. 16 gauge is going to be fine for that. Now, we're talking about
like I said earlier in the chat, big 3,000 watt amps, you're going to use big speakers, but we don't do that for combos. Short answer is that a speaker cable used for guitar will be noisy, and a guitar cable used for speakers may burn up or damage the amp, or does not sound very good. Favorite Gilmour tone and why? I was just thinking about this the other day because everyone who's doing the Gilmour tribute stuff and all the channels about it are chasing the Wall or Dark Side, and the Wall's cool the first jillion times, but the stuff on Animals is the real shit to me. Well, I'll back that up. Stuff like Fearless, I love that stuff. I'm not in an open G, but I love that stuff like Omega, Obscured by Clouds and Metal. But the Dog stuff is just I can't even choose a favorite. The solos, that whole tone descending thing that he and Rick Wright do kills me every time. The Vision Bell and is good, Wes, but man, all that's what's the best way to put this? All right, here's the Wall and everything since then. Where you listen to, I don't have the tuning, but and Animals, there's just so much stuff that was pushing. Pompeii is great, but Animals is just pushing all the rhythm stuff. They're funkier, they're faster. They're just really playing outside their typical Pink Floyd stuff, and I love the Pink Floyd stuff that you expect as well. But it's some nasty grooves and sounds on Animals. That doesn't mean that this isn't great. But Animals, and one of the best experiences of my life, 2005, my then wife and I went to London, and we flew into, I want to say Newark, but that's the wrong city. The other airport, not Heathrow. So we took the train and can't remember the name of the airport. Anyway, we flew to the airport and we take the train into London. And we got in like 4 a.m, and so it's dark outside. And she's jet lagged. She's sleeping on the train. Yeah, Gatwick. Thanks, guys. And I'm got my iPod because it's 2005, and I'm listening to my headphones, and I'm listening to Animals. And on my iPod, it had the album artwork on the front. And as we're coming on the train, and all of a sudden I see in the distance, as the sun came up, the first rosy fingers of dawn were caressing Battersea Power Station right there in front of me. As the train came in, there's Battersea Power Station in the sun. As I look at the screen of my phone, it's right there, and it's right there. There it is. And then in my headphones, you gotta be crazy. I'm like, oh my God. Did I say Battersea? Battersea. Gotta have a... Not my key. Not have a real need, But anyway, it was just, and no one else was in that car except my wife was asleep, and it was just perfect. I can't believe I said Battersea, yeah. Without the pig, and now without the shop. Back then it was without the shopping mall that's there now. Byrov, sorry, screen, my eyes were swimming. Got a speaker last night that arrived with a dent in the outer cone and doping. I've exchanged it, but a few guys from the gear page told me perfectly fine to run it like that. It could be fine. It could be bad. I'd say if you bought a new speaker and it arrived with any defect, exchange it. Just be sure. I don't think you made any mistake. Hey, Steak and Cheddar, what's the connection to Ronnie Scott's in this episode? Well, all week I've been primarily trying to get work done out dealing with some family stuff, so I've not been home as much as I'd like. So while I've been doing work until like 4 in the morning, I have not had a chance to put any videos out, so I have not had any photos or stills to use. And so I wanted something here, and I just went through my photos. That's a photo I took last August when I was in London, and I did not. I was not able to recreate the Battersea experience with the iPod because I no longer have an iPod, and I did not go to Gatwick. But I did walk down past Ronnie Scott's, and I thought it was kind of funny for me because I went all the way from Memphis to Ronnie Scott's there in Soho, and the guy who was playing at Ronnie Scott's advertised on the poster there was Booker T from Booker T and the MGs, who did all their music at Stax Music here, Stax Records, 7 minutes from my house. So, you know. It's hard to do that on an acoustic. I was thinking I had a Telecaster. I do not. Sorry, sometimes that E just hits right. Hey, Claybur P, there's a lot of good current amps out there. It depends on what styles you need. You know, I in my videos, amps under 500, amps under 1,000, I give some good contenders. And then I've got a playlist, I think it's called Gems, where things that I've really enjoyed have been put in there. I need to go through all my videos and make sure all the gems are in that playlist. I think I've got one called Turds as well. In '84, you got to play with Oscar Peterson at Ronnie Scott's West. My God, I hope you were either I didn't know you played drums. I hope you were really good or really drunk in '84. Wow. That's awesome. I assume you were pretty good to have the balls to get up on stage with Oscar Peterson. That's phenomenal. Let's see. He used Woman in Chains to tune PA system. Yeah, it is just like perfect. It's one of the last big '80s productions, but it doesn't have all the big '80s cliches yet. I mean, it has gated reverb, but it's not obnoxious, and I don't know. It's in CinemaScope, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, Dustin. Fantastic music, and the production is just so killer. Oh, Dan Boole is always welcome on here. I'd love to get to know him. I have a lot of respect for what he and Peter were able to pull off, even if it didn't last that long. You talk to Baxter at Casino Guitars about movie references. I like their show. I'm jealous of his hair. I mean, if I had that much hair, I'd probably have to brush it, but it's not holding him back. Oh, I like The Wall too. I've heard The Wall too much. Final Cut. I don't know if I've ever been able to finish the Final Cut. I lose interest because it just seems like Wall outtakes. It sounds like a Roger Waters solo project, and I've not enjoyed any Roger Waters solo projects. Have I any thoughts on push pull KT88s? Yeah, they're fine, but I don't have any thoughts specific to push pull KT88s. You can do the same thing. Basically, it's a 6L6 section, only more so, and you just got to watch your screen current and screen voltage. Let's see. Getting towards the end. I want to make sure I got all the questions. I've listened to Porcupine Tree enough to know that I admire them and respect them without wanting to listen to more of it. It doesn't speak to me, and I can't say why. Some music speaks to me, some doesn't. It is what it is. Like Beatles versus Stones. All Beatles with the exception of Hey Jude, Long Winding Road, Let It Be, Revolution 9, and Good Night. All other Beatles, fine. Stones, maybe four or five good albums, and then 1978 happened, and then nothing. Of course, the Stones went on way too long, but before like Let It Bleed, the Stones to me, some fantastic singles, no albums, and then I don't know. You can't quantify this stuff. You just know it it's like porn. You know it when you see it, right? Not that any of us would ever know what it looks like. Thank you, Mr. E-Train, and thank you for allowing me my full fucking range of expression. There's another reference for you guys. I have not heard Psychic Hearts. I know the Goo album really well. Mom is doing better, Ted. We're not out of the weeds all the way, but out of the woods all the way. But she is doing better, and I'm gonna be taking her tomorrow or Monday to get her nails did. I got her the first shower in 2 weeks last night. That was a lot of fun, giving my mother a shower and washing her hair and all that fun stuff. And I'm gonna take her Monday or tomorrow and get her nails did, and she'll feel much better. Let's see. 93 got two presents. Well, goody. Those are good presents to have in 1993. Oh, I think it's funny that you think that Eric Johnson's Strat Neck is a baseball bat is so much smaller than the one on my telly. My telly is 1 inch all the way down. Hey, all right. After I end, which is going to be in about 10, 15 minutes. Everyone who likes doing this stuff, come on over to Brad's stream there. There's a link if you guys want to copy and paste that. We'll leave that up there for a minute while I scroll down. Sorry about the sniffles. The weather keeps changing. Rhino's been releasing the Stax Volt singles collection on vinyl volumes. An amazing musical journey. Cool. Thanks, Alex. The coffee fund always needs replenishing. I appreciate you. Uh, 2009 Fender Twin Amp. I'm not familiar with the 2009 Fender Twin Amp. One input jack. Huh. I know the Red Knob and the Evil Twin and the reissues, but I don't know about a 2009 one input jack twin amp. But if it works, that's great. I believe it or not, I don't know every amp ever made. I've not had experience with every amp ever made, and I'm not even aware of every amp ever made. It's too hard. I have not had a chance. Well, it's not that I haven't had a chance. I've had plenty of chances to check out one. I could have bought one, but I have no inclination to. That's not a criticism of Josh and JHS. It's if I wanted to build a pedal to do a certain thing, I just design and build that pedal. But I'm the tiniest percentage of the marketplace that's possible to exist. I'm not. I really like Keith Williams from 5 Watt World. We talk fairly often. We enjoy talking. It's really hard for us to stop our conversations. I've not ordered a bus pedal yet for 2 reasons. Number one, if I don't like it, that's an awkward thing for the friendship. I probably would like it, but Second thing, I don't want to ask for a free one and put him in that spot. Second of all, if I've got stuff that I've already built that achieves similar things for me. You heard 2 of them at the beginning of the stream driving that Marshall, and Third reason, honestly, is I've got everything that I need, and I know that another pedal is not going to give me the ability to sound like Jeff McElroy, for instance. And Jeff will sound like that without the pedal. So I'm, again, the wrong market for pedals. But I know that the bus pedal that Keith and David Barber makes is really good. It's not great for my needs, and I just don't want to go there and have any thing that would affect the friendship, because I really value getting to know him. And if I ever reached, if I knew Josh, I might not have even said that, but it's not something that I need, so I haven't been wanting to buy one. I am thinking about saving up to buy a new microphone. That's the stuff that will let me do things that I need to do, because I cannot make a microphone. Well, technically I could. Be hideously expensive, though. Let's see. All right. I've actually, we need to hear from Mark Spurgeon. Yeah. Anyone know Mark personally? I know he's scheduled for surgery, and we've not heard anything. And I'll keep an eye out for him on Brad's stream later. Maybe he's sleeping in. He definitely needs to if he just had surgery. So if anyone out there knows Mark, let him know we're all thinking of him and in our thoughts. All right, well, we're at the last 10 minutes, so I want to talk about this blue chip pick, because I've been curious about these things for about a year. $35 for one pick. And, I looked it up, and yes, it's made from a material that's designed for ball bearings and very high pressure, it's very specialized industrial purposes. So that's a material that is expensive and rare, and few people machine it. One of the people who machines this material also plays guitar, and he had some extra bits from what he was doing, which is tool and die stuff and bearing plates, because it's very durable and very low tension, low drag. It's great for mechanics. And he had a little piece, and he tried it, and he sounded good. He made it, rough did a few picks for friends. They really liked it. So the material is expensive. It's really difficult to work with, and this is the side hustle for this guy. This guy's doing this material for other higher end purposes. So I understand the economics of that, but at the same time I thought, well, does it really make a difference? And I saw all the videos of people saying, you need this, you need that. And then I heard, a bunch of videos of Brian Sutton, where Brian Sutton never mentioned that, he uses this and it's his only pick he uses, but he was just using it. This is the one he uses. This is the same one that Billy Strings use. And I have no expectations that I buy this pick and instantly sound like Billy Strings or Brian Sutton. But I also know that they've tried every goddamn pick in the world, and they could use any goddamn pick they wanted. And they use this pick. So they do make thumb picks. So there had to be a reason for it. And then Keith Williams got some little round jazz ones, which is not what I would need, but he really likes them. And a lot of people really like them. People who aren't being paid to review them, people who aren't chasing, trying to buy tone or buy cool, like them. I thought, well, what the hell? Let me try one. I've wasted more than $35 on bad dinners. I've wasted more than $35 on picks that don't work for me. I've got some of these D'Andrea medium heavies that Zach Childs loves. And this is not the one, this one. And I really respect Zach. And he said that this was his favorite pick, and he tried all these picks, and he got this. So I bought a bag of like 12 of these for like $10. And then I had some other things I bought a bag of for like $10. And so I've spent more than $30 on large quantities of picks that I didn't care for. And I've certainly wasted money on bad burgers and pizzas and stuff. And I tend not to lose picks. I've had this blue Herdime for 15 years. I have a pickpocket in my jeans, and I tried this, and I tried everything else first. I tried this Prime Tone. I've tried the Claytons. I've tried all kinds of stuff. Fuck it. Life is short. I got this TP48, and it sounds better than the two picks I've been using previously for acoustic. I'll show you guys in another stream if you care. I'm not set up to really demonstrate what this really sounds like. It sounds better because it has the crispness for strumming with almost no drag. It's like there's no resistance to the string. Other picks, there's kind of a thuddy to it, or there's a little flexy thing. This has no resistance. It's just so smooth on the right hand, but it still has enough material in it that if I'm doing a single note thing, it really moves the string, and I really can control the dynamics as I play. I can dig in, and the pick will make it dig in, and I can play lightly, and it's very nuanced, and it feels so damn good, and the bevel's really nice. So the questions I had before I ordered one was, will it really feel good? Yes, it really does. Does it really sound good? I find that, yes, this is the sound that I was hoping to have, that I'd never quite found in one pick before. Is it worth it? As long as I don't lose it, yeah, it's worth it. And again, you're hearing me off mic at low volume. So this is not I'm not trying to show you the pick. I'm telling past me, yes, if you do all the other research and you're curious and you think it might work, try it. It's worth it. It won't work for everyone. Not everyone will love it. I love it on acoustic. I really like the sound on electric, but the size of this TP, to me, which sounds weird to say, is a bit much for some of my electric needs. I might want to. I wish they'd send me some samples because they're expensive to try out. I might try a Jazz 3 size because I like the Jazz 3 a lot. And I might try a regular size because I'm used to that on electric as well, just to have a little more sense of where it is for a pinch harmonic. So I may just get really used to this. It sounds really good on electric. I wish that people could try them in person. It's hard to drop without squeezing it. Keep my hand relaxed. It wants to stay in place. And I know I'm not the world's best picker, and this is not the best demo of this. I'm not being paid to. I'm just saying, hey, I thought, what if this is a scam? If this is a scam, I'd be like, hey, man, I just wasted $35, just like on that bad pizza, whatever. It does what it says on the tin. You got to choose the shape and thickness that works for you. And if you think it's nonsense, don't buy one. But I have tried just about every regular pick on the market, and every pick has its purpose. Like this Herd Im for the U2 stuff is really good. I like the Jazz 3s. I don't like all the Jazz 3 materials, like this Ultex Jazz 3. I hate this pick. It's too bright. This V pick, someone left a V pick here. It sounds phenomenal for single note stuff. But for strumming, it's awful. It grabs the string. You can't strum with this damn thing. At least I can't, And like these D'Andreas medium heavies that Zach loves, it has too much flex in the pick to me. And I've tried the tip and I've tried the shoulder. But we all have different hands and different needs. So I'm really happy with this. And, $35. If you love the sound, worth trying. If you've ever played an old tortoiseshell pick, that's the closest thing I can think of. This is very close in sound to a well-maintained old tortoiseshell pick. And it speaks. The notes come out the way I want. I don't feel like I'm going to drop them. And if the guys at Blue Chips see this and hear this, I'd love to try a few different. That's the one worry. I'd love to try a few different sizes and thicknesses. But at $35 each, it's hard to order blind. The good news is they're really durable, so they're supposed to last like a decade. And the champ hits the canvas, yeah. But I picked it up. At least it's not clear like the picks I used back in the 90s. You drop them, it's like, oh, everyone stop, I'll drop my contact. Yeah, I wish it were a different color than brown for that reason, but this is the material. This is the color that material is. You can't dye it. It is what it is. It's some weird surface. Try it, don't try it. But if you're already curious about it, or you're curious about it, you find this section of the video, yeah, give it a try. It's not a scam. It's really good. I really do notice these differences, and I've played, and while I'm not the world's best player, I have played so many things out there. That's what I do. It's the real deal. Whether it's your real deal or not, only you can tell. Maybe some guys don't use a pick. The whole point's moot. Some guys get everything they need from an old Fender medium, and to me, it just sounds like flapping a newspaper on it. I don't get any juice out of a Fender medium. But anyway, like Wes, you've been digging the Dunlop Primetone picks. Well, here's a Primetone 1.3 that I thought was going to be close to this blue chip because they look similar in the similar thicknesses and the sculpting. And this feels so much different and better to me. It's all subjective. And sounds better to me. This Primetone has got a thud on the string attack. Thud, 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 thud. Totally absent on this. I've got a Primetone, a different Primetone 1.3, a more traditional shape here. This clear one sounds different than the Primetone, which is opaque. Neither of them sound at all like this. I've got the Jazz 3 Primetones, and the Primetones are good, but this really is, if a Primetone's about $4 each and this is $35 each, I think it is. If you don't lose it, I think it is 10 times better. But that's me. All right, it is 4:01. We're going to sign off on this, and Brad's going to take over on his stream. So see you guys there in a little bit. I want to thank you all for being here. I've got to remember to do this thing here. Yeah, I don't like the sound of thin picks unless I'm doing if I were doing like a Nashville strung pass on it, I'd grab a thin pick and just get that airiness to add in, but not as a main pick. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. Now it's time for Brad to ramble. See you guys next time.